This is one of those stories where I would like to talk to pastors who use it. Hmm. The story goes like this. Okay, so a guy has stopped going to church, and the pastor goes and visits him, which you've got to say is actually pretty good. Um, and it's a cold winter's night. Must have been ages ago. I don't know where the story came from. But the pastor goes and visits, and there's a hot fire going in the fireplace, and it's full of coals. And the pastor goes and sits in the seat, and the guy sits there, and the pastor gets one of those tongs, and he reaches in and pulls out one of the hot coals and puts it just on the hearth, and then soon the hot coal loses its glow and it loses, it just becomes cold and smoulders. And the pastor just gets up, gets the tongs, puts the coal back in the fire, and the coal regains its ardor. It gets its fire going again. And the pastor gets up to leave, and the man says, "Thank you for your fiery sermon. I'll be back at church on Sunday." And I like the story. I like certain aspects of it. First, that the pastor took the trouble to actually visit the man. That's significant. That someone noticed the man's absence and took the time to actually show concern. I also like the concept of each member of the church of the fire warming each other's spiritual life. And the third thing I like is that there is a time and place where people can come, there is a place where people can come and stir each other up to love and good works. I really think that's important, though. There's a couple of questions, though. One is, why did the man stop going to church? And I've just put in my notes, was it burnout? Because, sorry, but there's a lot of people that stop going to church because they just get burnt out on religion and doing. Or they just don't think the theology of the church actually is right or true or right for them at this stage in life, and they want to explore some other things about how they view God. Um, the second thing is I'd like to ask is church life all about compliance to attending a meeting? Because it seems that that is the story behind it. Like, while the pastor might have very good motives that this person is not part of the community, so often, church church is about attendance. And I've had people when I was pastoring, "Oh, sorry, pastor, I didn't get to church last Tuesday night or Sunday," and I'm like, I don't really care if you don't come. I'd much rather you are growing your faith in the Lord, and that's more what I'm concerned about. Are you growing? It's not about numbers. But what I really don't like about the story is that it has been used to enforce a compliance to a group where there's potentially no desire to explore, discover, touch, and the other person's coal. Soul talk is kind of secondary to compliance. Instead, it's often churches that it's more about compliance with a set of rules and behaviors. And for some, I have talked with, they being a coal, they've been kicked out of the fire or they've not been allowed to come back in. And you've got to ask, why do people leave the church? And maybe why are more people not going to church? What is church? And if you want to explore that question, there's some really good content in my show notes, in my blog post by a guy called Alan Jameson, who's a New Zealander. He did a whole big study on the churchless faith. But um, I'm not sure about that story. I understand. I think there's good things in it, but I do think it can be used as a manipulation. So, what sort of church? Because this blog, this YouTube video, we're focused on mental health and Christian spirituality. And what sort of church would help someone when they have mental struggles such as schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, personality disorders, addiction issues? Maybe the person's had a history of being sexually abused. Perhaps they cut and self-harm. Perhaps there's a lot of PTSD happening in the person. What if what if most of those in pastoral care were in some sort, in the church, most of them were in some sort of long-term residential care due to mental illness? How would church need to be to meet their unique requirements? By the way, when I was doing exactly that and looking at the needs of the least of them as such, I soon discovered that the way that we did church actually met a lot of the needs of the most of them. People liked what we were doing, and they didn't have to have a mental illness to be part of the group. They really liked the style and the theology and how we did things. Look, statistics tell us that 1 in 5, that's 20% of people at any one time, will be experiencing some sort of mental unwellness. Could be depression, anxiety, grief, addiction issues, etc. So let's just say this, okay, 1 in 5 people in the church that you might attend will be experiencing some form of mental unwellness. 1 in 5. Okay, that's if if your congregation is normal population, all right. For most of them, they'll get on life and not be disabled by the illness. They'll be able to carry on with life. It'll be there, but it's not a disabling thing. For some, that they may not even know they are unwell. I don't even realize I'm depressed. Oh, don't even realize I'm anxious. Dig a little bit deeper, and we start to understand. But in digging deeper into the statistics, we find that 5% of the population will be experiencing a serious mental health disorder that disrupts work, family, or social life. And when I talk about a serious mental illness, it's defined this way as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder resulting in serious functional impairment which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. Well, there's a big definition. So, for every 100 people you meet, there will be 5 experiencing a serious mental illness. Okay. And it is likely that at some stage in your life, you'll be one of the 20%. Okay. 1 in 5. You also could become part of that 5%. That's the 5 in 100. Personally, I was in the 5% for a brief period, and no one came. Nobody, no visitor, no pastor visited me to tend to my burnt out coal. It seems that when you join the words church and mental health, it becomes like a yet another add-on to the ministry list of the church. So typically, they've got a really good mental health focus in this church. They've set up a counselling service. They've got a housing program. They have soup kitchens, a food bank, a second-hand clothing shop, a prayer group, a 12-step program for addiction. These people, they would say, need professional help. And so the church gives them a program. Okay. And it's all very nice, neat. Keep your hands tidy and be safe. Political correctness, pastoral correctness. And the preacher still preaches sermons that those struggling with attention deficits struggle to process. Okay. And music is still pumped up and primed out to satisfy the endorphin kick we addictively crave. Yet it's just too loud and overpowering for many. Remember the 1 in 5 or the 5 in 100. How they been affected, the least of them. By the way, when you hear the words, oh, wasn't the worship really great? Could it simply be that you've had an endorphin hit, just like you'll get at any sort of pop concert, and you've named it as God? I'm kind of cynical about these things, okay? And wow, and I've heard this one. a book has been sold about the 12 steps of being a successful Christian, and it's to be read by all the church and all the groups. Yet, many of the church can't read a book or afford the $25. And so what happens is, oh, okay, we will give you the book. You don't have to pay. And then the person that you've given it to feels really stink because they can't. They've just become a charity case. So Jenny or John or leaves her pew, wanders home, sits alone with her Bible, and talks with Jesus. I think the church has wandered a long way away from the days of a few friends walking a path and Jesus joining them. That's what I think the church is about. What would it be like if the pastor in the original story came to the man and asked some gently curious questions about his soul? That they both prayed together, that they had church together around the fire. They shared a meal and listened deeply to each other. The pastor learning from the man and his struggles, and the man learning about the pastor. And that a conversation took place where both were converted into a better way of doing. And I love this quote. True conversation always puts the conversants at risk because you cannot truly converse without the risk of conversion. Love it. Bernard Lee, Michael Cowan. There's got to be an openness to change, a willingness to be converted. Perhaps the pastor in the original story would share in the preaching a kind of lived truth that touched the dying coals of the congregants. Another quote by Dwight L. Moody. Our great problem is the problem of trafficking in unlived truth. We try to communicate what we've never experienced in our own life. Dwight L. Moody. I love it. And perhaps the whole of the fire glowed brighter because each coal got to know the deepest needs of the other coals and the coals outside of the fire that hadn't joined in. Perhaps, maybe, like those pilgrims heading to Emmaus, they would say, didn't our hearts burn with us as he talked with us on the road and explained the scriptures to us? That's the kind of church I like to be in, where there's a kind of a burning going on between each other, and it's like, this is good, this is good, this is good. When I started back in ministry in 1998, and I was given the call of actually creating a church space for people with serious mental illnesses, I was given a book called Connecting by Dr. Larry Crabb, and it was just, you know how sometimes it's just right book, right time. So, and I read this in his book called Connecting. He says this, and Larry Crabb, he's a psychologist, Christian, thoroughly deep Christian, and he's making a shift. So here he says, in recent days I've made a shift. I'm now working toward the day when communities of God's people, ordinary Christians, whose lives regularly intersect, will accomplish most of the good that we now depend on mental health professionals to provide. And they do it by connecting with each other in ways that only the gospel makes possible. I envision a community of people who intentionally mingle in settings where these nutrients are passed back and forth, where I pour into you the healing resources within me, and you pour into me what God has put into you. But that's not what I'm doing. I have strong reason to suspect that Christians sitting dutifully in church congregations, for whom going to church means doing a variety of spiritual activities, have been given resources that, if released, could powerfully heal broken hearts, overcome the damage done by abusive backgrounds, encourage the depressed to courageously move forward, stimulate the lonely to reach out, revitalize discouraged teens and children with new and holy energy, and encourage hope into the lives of the countless people who feel rejected, alone, and useless. Maybe going to church more than anything else means relating to several people in your life differently. Maybe the centre of Christian community is connecting with a few. Beneath what our culture calls psychological disorder is a soul crying out for what only community can provide. There is no disorder requiring treatment. And contrary to hardline moralism, there is more to our struggles than a stubborn will needing firm admonishment. Beneath all our problems, there are desperately hurting souls that find the nourishment only community can provide, or die. We must do more than train professional experts to fix damaged psyches. Damaged psyches aren't the problem. The problem beneath our struggles is a disconnected soul. What we must do we must do more than something we must do something more than exhort people to do what's right and then hold them accountable. Groups tend to emphasize accountability when they don't know how to relate. Better behavior through exhortation isn't the solution, though it sometimes is part of it. Rather than fixing psyches or scolding sinners, we must provide nourishment for the disconnected soul that only a community of connected people can offer. The crisis of care in modern culture, especially in the Western Church, will not be resolved by training more therapists. Good. Thank you, Larry. We do not need a counselling centre on every corner. It will be worsened by moralists who never reach deeply into the hearts of people in their efforts to impose their standards of behaviour on others, even when those standards are biblical. The greatest need in modern civilization is the development of communities, true communities, where the heart of God is at home, where the humble and wise learn to shepherd those on the path behind them, where trusting strugglers lock arms with others as together they journey on. Dr. Larry Crabb. Boom. Love it. That's my passion. That's my call. In a few weeks' time, I'm going to be doing a class. It's called, what's it called? It's called This is Church, Jim, but not as we know it. And it's like talking about the Star Trek, but actually, if Star Trek went to another planet and saw these people relating much like what Larry says, what would it look like? We're going to be talking about in the class. It's you'll find the notes and the links and stuff in the show in over on the web. Sign up to the email list and you'll get details of it and future classes too. But until then, I pray that your fire and your coal would burn alongside a few safe others. Okay, see ya.